Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Doombringer by Marcel Liemant, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Metal clanged against stone in the heart of Havoc Mountain. Oden drew back his pickaxe and eyed the wall of black rock in the dim candlelight. The hole he'd managed to hack away was a meter round and 2 meters deep, but still, nothing. After a night of drawing strength and stamina from his worn and weary bones, there was no lucent crystals. There was no magic. His muscles screamed in protest as Oden hauled the pickaxe above his head and smashed it down into the mountain's insides. Hard, black stone sprayed into the thick, sweaty air, and just as Oden was about to search for the telltale signs of a new vein of magic, a rough hand clapped his shoulder. "The finest froth in Shard Moor calls my name." Oden grunted and turned his weary gaze to his oldest friend, Tinor. His sharp features cast shadows over his hollow cheeks. His buggy eyes slowly retreated further into his skull with every passing year. He was empty-handed but for his worn pickaxe. It was a hard night in the mine for all. "Not a vein in sight," Oden said glumly. Tinor shook his head, spraying sweat and dirt. "But a golden ale river is set to flow," he said, waggling his bushy eyebrows like he'd done since they were kids. Oden chuckled as he watched Tinor duck into the exit tunnel, no doubt heading straight for the pub. Though his smile fell away as he thought of Penny, his young daughter, tucked up in bed and about to wake to a world near its end. The walk home in the crisp air felt longer than usual. The valley was a sea of brown, too hardened to plow and too void of nourishment to grow anything worth eating. Burnt husks of once grand trees lined the turnoff to his hometown Shard Moor. Oden tried not to let the lightness of the empty sack on his shoulder blacken his mood. Havoc Mountain had weathered many dry spells before. He tried to ignore that this time felt different. Like the mountain was sending them some kind of sign he did not want to know. The closer the uneven path drew to his home, the easier it was to cast aside his concerns. The air was different on his hill. As he broached the crest, he could see the clusters of large black crystals he'd wedged into the border of his small wooden farmhouse. Like the defensive spikes of a battlefield. Oden closed his eyes as a light, cold breeze brushed against his red cheeks, carrying with it the rose-scented breath of the Brillius. The morning star was at his back when he walked through the front door. His heavy footsteps added a fresh layer of black dirt and dust onto the already mucky floor. Oden kicked off his boots and tiptoed through the tight halls of his home straight towards his workshop. If he could rebind the Brillius spell before Penny awoke, it would ease the shine of her dreams into waking. He unlocked the dark wood door, glanced over his shoulder, and stepped inside. The small room was a mess of haphazard wooden beams and stone mechanisms. The shelves lining every inch of the wall were packed full of leather-bound books, crystals of all shapes and sizes, and corked bottles of potions and powders. At its center was a finely carved chair, connected at hundreds of points by rope and wood to the chaos of pulleys and beams. The caster. Carefully to quietly lock the door behind him, Oden ducked under the hanging pieces and rifled through the shards of crystals on the shelves and workbench. He ground his teeth and swept an armful of useless rocks onto the floor. None possessed the spark of lucent he needed to conduct magic. He got down on his hands and knees and ran his hands over the grimy floor. His fingertips tingled as they brushed against a crystal lodged at the back corner of his workbench. When he pulled the sharp rock into the light, luminous veins pulsed at its core. The lucent. Oden grinned. It wasn't much, but it was enough for another day of smiles for Penny. Oden shrugged off his mining leathers. The fresh air was cool against his sweat, stung the swollen edges of the jagged crystals jutting out from beneath the skin of his arms, shoulders, back, and bald head. He placed his new find onto a counterbalance, which swung into action, knocking the caster into gear. Oden cracked his knuckles, mottled with tiny crystals like scales, and a small green current flashed between his hands. The caster leapt to life. Spinner spun, wood stretched and cracked, and Oden's crystals glowed emerald. That's it, Oden murmled. His whole body felt alight with thousands of speeding passageways. He grabbed a worn wooden crank and turned it until he felt the power in his bones leaving him and entering the caster. Crackles of green bolts shot outwards, slamming into the walls and roof. Oden's breathing was ragged as the magic poured out of his body and into the spell, into the Brillius. The house groaned and the walls breathed a sigh of relief. Oden stepped out of the caster and fell to his knees. Oxygen wouldn't come fast enough into his lungs. He shook as the crystals embedded in his bones as bolts slowly cooled from burning hot to tingling warm. Oden pulled himself out of his workshop and slipped back into the hall. The effect of the Brillius spell was immediate. The hall was longer now and brighter, like the star itself had taken up residence. In the kitchen, the range was clean, the bread from yesterday looked puffy and fresh, and the wood of the table and chairs gleamed. Oden sighed a pink breath of relief. The effect of the Brillius wouldn't last long for him, but in the moments right after the rebinding, he could almost imagine that everything was okay. Papa? A bleary-eyed little girl stood in the doorway. Her dark hair was a tangled mess, sporting a few twigs from her adventures of the day before. At 6, she was the spitting image of her mother, blue eyes and chubby cheeks. Good morning, chicken, Oden said and bent down, holding out his arms. Penny's sleepy face broke into a grin, and she raced into her father's embrace. She examined Oden up close, her smile growing larger like hope still existed. Oden walked them over to the window. What can you see today, chicken? Penny laid her head between the crystal spikes of Oden's shoulder. The forest is bigger than yesterday, she said happily. Solstice is here, right, Papa? That's right. What else? Blue sky, purple clouds, dancing flowers, she said dreamily. Oden shook his head at the potency of the Brillius spell. After all these years, it was a wonder how it kept the harsh truth from his young daughter. When he looked out the window, all he could see were barren hills and smoke on the horizon.